What happens when a late-night interview spirals so far out of control that security has to step in? Tonight, we're breaking down the jaw-dropping moment Pete Davidson was escorted off. The Tonight Show after an exchange with Jimmy Fallon that left the studio audience stunned. This wasn't your usual awkward celebrity interview. This was something else entirely. Before we dive in, make sure you hit subscribe and drop a comment because you're not going to believe how this unfolded. But Tonight Show tapings usually run like clockwork. Jimmy comes out, delivers his monologue, maybe hits a sketch, then slides into interviews with that signature desk slap and easygoing charm. But on this particular night, the energy felt off from the moment Pete Davidson stepped onto the stage. The audience cheered as usual, but if you watch closely, Pete's smile didn't reach his eyes. He sat across from Jimmy, and almost immediately, the tension was palpable. Jimmy leaned forward, grinning. "Pete Davidson, everyone, great to have you back, man. It's been a while." Pete nodded, settling into the chair, but somehow not settling at all. Arms crossed, half smile faint, his voice flat. "Yeah, it's been a minute." Jimmy laughed as always, but you could sense him trying to read the room. "So, I've got to ask," he continued, shuffling his note cards. "You've been all over lately. Stand up. New projects. What's keeping you busy these days?" Pete paused longer than anyone expected. The audience quieted, waiting. Finally, he leaned back and said, "Honestly, Jimmy, I'm just trying to get through interviews like this without losing my mind." Nervous chuckles rippled through the crowd. Jimmy laughed too, but it felt different. Forced. "Oh, come on. We always have fun though, right?" he said, trying to steer things back to familiar territory. Pete stared. "Do we?" he asked. "Duh." And just like that, the energy in Studio 6B shifted. This wasn't banter anymore. Something real was surfacing. Jimmy's smile flickered, but he pushed on. "I mean, yeah, you're always great on the show. People love when you come on." He gestured toward the audience, seeking support. A smattering of applause followed, hesitant, unsure. Pete leaned forward, elbows on his knees, eyes locked on Jimmy. "You know what's funny, Jim? You say people love when I come on, but I don't think you've ever actually listened to a single thing I've said on this show." The audience fell silent. A cough echoed somewhere in the back. Jimmy's face shifted through a rapid sequence of emotions. "What? What do you mean?" "Of course, one listen. We have great conversations." Pete shook his head slowly. "Nah, you don't. You ask your questions from those cards." Fake laugh, then cut to commercial. "That's not a conversation. It's a script." Jimmy tried to play it off, glancing at the audience as if Pete were joking. "Well, it's a talk show. There's a format. You know that." Pete leaned in, voice sharp. "A format where you pretend to care about your guests, but really, you just want them to entertain you for 11 minutes so you can move on to the next thing." The tension in the room was suffocating. Jimmy sat down his cards, clearly recalculating. "Pete, I don't know what's going on, but if you're not feeling up for this, we don't have to do it." Pete laughed, bitter and cutting. "There it is. The concerned host routine. You're good at that." Jimmy's jaw tightened. "I'm trying to be respectful here, man. If you don't want to be here, you don't have to be here." Pete stood. The audience gasped, but he didn't. Levy just stood there, looming over Jimmy. "You want me to tell you what the problem is, Jimmy?" "The problem," Pete said, voice steady, "is everyone in this building treats people like props. You bring us out. We tell our funny stories, laugh at your jokes of in when they're not found. Then we leave. None of it's real. None of it means anything." Jimmy stood face flushing. "That's not fair. Pete, I've had you on this show multiple times. I've always been supportive." Pete stepped closer, eyes locked. "Supportive? You made jokes about my personal life and your monologue 3 months ago. Didn't call. Didn't ask if it was okay. You just did it because it gets laughs." Jimmy's mouth opened, but no words came immediately. The audience froze. Cameras rolled. Silence. "That's part of the job," Jimmy finally said. His voice tense. "We make jokes about what's in the news. You know that." Pete's expression went cold. "Part of the job, just like it's part of the job to sit here and pretend you care about anyone other than yourself." A ripple of shocked murmurs ran through the studio. Jimmy pointed at Pete, hand trembling slightly. "You need to watch what you're saying right now." Pete didn't flinch. "Or what? Jim, you'll kick me off your show. Go ahead. At least that would be honest." Jimmy glanced off camera, presumably at producers. Face a mix of panic and fury. "We need to go to commercial," he muttered, but the mic was hot. Everyone heard. Pete turned to the audience. "You all see this, right? This is what happens when you stop playing along. They cut the commercial. Pete's eyes returned to Jimmy. You're exactly what people think you are. Crew members began moving from the sides of the stage. Jimmy's voice sharpened. No more TV host charm. Pete, you need to let Ven know. Pete laughed, shaking his head. There it is. Can't handle one real moment on your show, can you? A security guard stepped onto the stage. Pete raised his hands. Mox. Don't worry, I'm going. Wouldn't want to ruin the vibe. He started toward the exit, then paused mid-step. Hey, Jimmy, one more thing. Jimmy stared, lips pressed tight. Thanks for proving my point. The guard reached Pete just as he finished the line, but Pete didn't resist, just stood, waiting, daring Jimmy to respond. The studio held its breath. Jimmy finally spoke. Voice different from anything on air before. You want real? Let's be real. He stepped around the desk. A move he never makes unless it's planned. You come on my show, you accept the invitation. You know what this is? Then you act like you're above it all. That's not brave. That's disrespectful. Pete raised an eyebrow. Disrespectful. You want to talk about disrespect? The guard looked uncertain, unsure whether to intervene. Pete brushed off the hand gently and stepped back. Towards center stage. I came on this show because my publicist said I had to. Apparently, if you don't do the late-night circuit, you're not promoting your work properly. But let me ask you something, Jimmy. When's the last time you had a real conversation with someone? When's the last time you actually cared about the answer to a question you asked? Jimmy's face re-eamed, hands clenched at his sides. I care about every guest who comes on this show. Do you know how many people I talk to every week? How many stories I hear? Pete cut him off. You hear them? Sure, but do you listen? There's a difference. Someone in the audience shouted, let him talk. But it wasn't clear who they meant. The entire situation had spiraled beyond anyone's script. Jimmy glanced at the cameras, then back at Pete. Trapped in a moment no one could control. We're still rolling. Jimmy muttered almost to himself, then louder toward Pete. Fine. You want to do this here? Let's do it. What exactly is your problem with me? Pete ran a hand through his hair, and for a brief moment, he looked genuinely exhausted. My problem isn't with you, Jimmy, he said, voice low, almost weary. My problem is with all of this. He gestured around the studio. We're all just going through the motions, threatening it matters, pretending any of this is real connection. You sit behind that desk every night, laughing at everything, acting enthusiastic, but it's all surface. No depth, no truth. Jimmy's voice rose sharp now. This is a comedy show. Pete Entertainment. People watch because they want to laugh, escape their problems for an hour, not have some existential crisis shoved in their face. Maybe that's the problem. Pete shot back, intensity creeping into his tone. Maybe people are tired of escaping. Maybe they want something real. For once, the audience shifted, murmuring. Some nodded. Some looked uncomfortable. Jimmy shook his head firm. You don't get to come on here and lecture everyone about what's real and what's not. You're a performer just like me. Everything you do is calculated. Don't pretend you're some beacon of authenticity. Pete paused. He considered Jimmy's words carefully, then finally said, You're right. I am a performer, but at least I'm honest about being a mess. At least I don't hide behind this. Perfect. Happy facade all the time. Jimmy stepped closer, closing the distance between them to just a few feet. The security guard remained at the edge of the stage along with the producer, who had cautiously joined. My persona, Jimmy said, voice trembling slightly. You think this is a persona? I work my tail off for this show. I try to make people smile. I try to give guests a platform, and you're going to stand here and tell me it's all fake. Pete's voice dropped. Quieter. No, but sharper, more intense than before. I'm saying you've been doing this so long, Pete said, voice steady. You don't even know the difference anymore. You've become the character, Jim. The way he said Jim carried no warmth, just a pointed sting. Jimmy's face went pale like he'd been slapped. Get off my stage. Jimmy snapped. Seriously, we're done here. Pete didn't move. That's what I thought. The second it gets uncomfortable, shut it down. Jimmy spun to the producer. Get him out of here now. The producer and the security guard stepped forward. Pete, you need to leave, the producer said, voice tight, strained. Pete glanced at them, then back at Jimmy. You can't even do it yourself. Need other people to fight your battles. Jimmy whirled. You want me to do it myself? Fine. He closed the distance close enough for the cameras to adjust focus. You think you're special because you're damaged. Because you've been through stuff. We've all been through stuff, Pete. The difference is some of us don't use it as an excuse to be miserable and drag everyone else down. The audience gasped, a few muttered, "Oh, like this was a rap battle." Pete's jaw tightened. "That's a low blow, even for you." Jimmy didn't flinch. "You started this. Came on here looking for a fight, and now you're getting one. Want authenticity? Here it is. You're talented, funny, but exhausting. Every headline, every news story, it's always something self-destructive. Then you want sympathy." Pete's voice turned icy. "You don't know anything about me." Jimmy laughed, sharp cutting. "I know enough. You come on shows like this and trash them afterward. Act too cool for it all. But you keep showing up because you need the attention just like everyone else." Pete's face softened for a fleeting moment, vulnerability peeking through, before the walls came back up. "At least I need it," he said quietly. "At least I'm not pretending I don't." The room went still. Even the camera's hum felt loud. Jimmy seemed to register he'd gone too far. Or maybe he was simply spent. "Look, this is insane. We can't do this here." Pete nodded slowly. "Yeah, you're right. Can't have people seeing the real you, can we?" He began to turn. Jimmy grabbed his arm, not harshly, but enough to stop him. "Don't put this on me. You came out here with an agenda." Pete looked at Jimmy's hand, then up at his face. "Let go of me, Jimmy." But warning. Jimmy released him instantly, stepping back. "Just leave, Pete. Please." For a heartbeat, it seemed he might walk off. He moved a few steps toward the exit, security and producer trailing. Then he stopped, pivoted, and faced a silent audience one last time. "You know what the saddest part is?" he said, voice carrying. "You actually believe your own act. Think you're a good guy because you smile and act nice on camera, but you're just as hollow as the rest of this industry. You've just gotten better at hiding it." Jimmy's face shifted, hurt, fury, confusion all at once. "I've tried to be good to you," he said, voice breaking. "Every time you've been on this show, I've been supportive, given you space to promote your work, laughed at your jokes, been a friend." Pete's expression didn't change. "You've been a host. There's a difference." Jimmy threw up his hands. "What do you want from me, Pete? What would make this okay?" Pete paused, weighing it then. "Nothing. That's the point. Nothing you can do." This he gestured around. "The studio isn't set up for real human connection. It's set up for content, and I'm tired of being content." The producer tried again. "Okay, guys. We really need to wrap this." Neither acknowledged her. Jimmy inhaled, trying to steady himself. "If you hate this so much, why keep doing it? Why not walk away?" Pete's smile was small. "Sad. I don't know how to do anything else." "Same as you." That landed differently, quieter. Jimmy studied him for a long moment, and in that silence, something passed between them. A fleeting recognition, a fragile understanding. Jimmy's face hardened again. "We're not the same." Pete laughed, a real, unguarded laugh. "The first since he walked onto the stage. You really believe that, don't you? Think you're different because you wear a suit. Because you're polite. Because you play by the rules. But we're both just trying to make people laugh, so they don't forget about us. We're both terrified of being irrelevant." Jimmy's eyes narrowed. "Don't project your issues onto me. I love what I do." Pete nodded slowly. "I'm sure you do, but loving what you do and being honest about what it costs. That's two different things." The audience leaned forward, captivated. This had gone far beyond a typical talk show moment. No one knew what would happen next. Jimmy walked back toward his desk, but didn't sit. He leaned against it. "You know what, Pete? Maybe you're right about some of this. Maybe the format is shallow. Maybe it's not real connection, but it's what people want. They don't want to see this." He gestured between them. "They want to feel good, laugh, forget their problems for a while. What's wrong with giving them that?" Pete actually considered it. "Nothing's wrong with it, I guess. But don't call it real. Don't pretend it's meaningful. Just call it what it is. Entertainment, distraction, whatever. But this thing where we all pretend we're having genuine moments. That's what bothers me." Jimmy pushed off the desk, stepping closer. "So, what's your solution? Stop doing interviews. Stop trying to connect with people, even if it's imperfect." Pete shrugged. "I don't have a solution. I just don't want to pretend anymore." The security guard shifted uneasily. Unsure if this was still a situation requiring interventional, if it had turned into something else entirely, the producer hovered, phone in hand, likely checking in with someone higher up. Jimmy rubbed his face, exhausted. "This is insane. We're having this conversation on live television, not live." Pete corrected, calm, almost teasing. "You're taping this. You can edit it, cut it, make it whatever you want." Jimmy shook his head. We're not cutting this. This is real, right? This is what you wanted. Pete looked surprised. You're actually going to air this. Jimmy spread his arms. Why not? You want authenticity? Here it is. Let people see what happens when someone comes on the show and decides to burn it all down. The audience murmured, excitement rippling through the studio. Sensing something historic unfolding, Pete studied Jimmy's face, trying to read him. You're bluffing. Try me, Jimmy said. You think I'm just some corporate puppet, right? Some guy who does what he's told and never colors outside the lines. Fine, let's show people what really happens when things go off script. Pete actually smiled a real genuine smile. Now we're getting somewhere. Jimmy didn't smile back. Don't mistake this for us being friends. Pete, I'm doing this because you've put me in an impossible position. I either kick you off and prove your point that I can't handle real moments, or I let this play out and we both look insane. Pete nodded. Exactly. So, what do you want to do? The tension shifted, still thick, but now it felt different. Two people navigating an impossible situation, trying to find a way forward. Jimmy looked at the audience, then the cameras, then back at Pete. I want to understand why you're really doing this, not the speech about authenticity and connection. The real reason? The real reason? What happened? Jimmy asked, his voice low, almost careful. Pete's expression closed off again. Nothing happened. This is just how I feel. Jimmy shook his head. No, people don't blow up an interview for no reason. Something triggered this. What was it? The studio fell silent, the audience holding its breath. Pete looked down at his shoes when he met Jimmy's gaze again. His eyes were different. Vulnerable. Raw. You really want to know? He asked. Jimmy nodded. Yeah, I do. Pete drew a slow breath. I was watching the show a few weeks ago. You had some actor, and I don't even remember who, and you were doing your thing asking about their new movie, laughing at all the right moments. They were doing their thing, telling rehearsed stories, hitting their marks. And I thought, this is what I have to do tomorrow. I have to go on these shows and pretend everything is perfect, that my life is this fun adventure. And I realized I can't do it anymore. I can't put on the mask again. The room felt heavier now. The anger from before had melted into something raw, more exposed. Jimmy's voice softened. Why didn't you just cancel? Why not skip it if you felt like that? Pete laughed. But it was hollow, a sound that carried the weight of too many forced smiles. That's not how it works. Cancel and you're difficult. Unprofessional. You're letting people down. So you show up. You do the thing even when you don't want to. Even when it's killing you inside. Jimmy shifted uncomfortably, like he was seeing something he didn't want to confront. Pete, if you're struggling, there are better ways to handle it than this. Pete's voice sharpened, cutting through the quiet. There it is. The pivot to concern. I'm not asking for your help, Jimmy. I'm just telling you why I couldn't sit here and play along tonight. But you are asking for help, Jimmy pressed. Maybe not directly, but coming out here and sabotaging the interview. That's a cry for help. Pete's jaw tightened. Don't psychoanalyze me. You're not qualified. Jimmy held up his hands. I'm not trying to. I'm just saying after being in this industry as long as I have, I recognize when someone is spiraling. The word hung in the air. Pete took a step closer. Not aggressive, just deliberate. I'm not spiraling. I'm awake. There's a difference. Spiraling is losing control. I'm completely in control right now. I'm choosing not to participate in something that feels empty. To me. Jimmy's voice rose again, but it's not empty. That's what I'm trying to tell you. Maybe it's not a deep philosophical conversation, but it matters to people. The woman who works 2 jobs and comes home to unwind. The kid having a hard day who laughs for the first time. This means something to them. Just because it's not meaningful to you doesn't make it worthless. Pete paused, letting it sink in. I never said it was worthless. Jimmy pressed forward. But you're acting like it is. Treating me like some villain for trying to give people a place to escape. I don't think you're a villain, Pete said softly. I think you're scared. Scared that if you stop smiling, stop being upbeat. If people see you struggle like the rest of us, they won't love you anymore. Jimmy's face flushed. That's not you. Don't know what you're talking about. His voice cracked. Pete nodded. I do because I'm scared of the same thing. I'm scared that if I stop being the funny, damaged guy, if I stop making jokes about my trauma, people won't care about me. So, I get it, Jimmy. I get why you do it. I just can't anymore. The producer stepped forward. Guys, we really need to make a decision. We've been rolling for way too long. Jimmy ignored her, eyes locked on Pete. So, what happens now? You walk off. We never speak again. You tell everyone I'm fake. Pete shrugged. I don't know. Didn't really think past this moment. Jimmy laughed bitter. Of course you didn't. That's very on brand. Pete smiled faintly. There it is. That's real. That's you reacting instead of performing. Jimmy shook his head, almost smiling. You're exhausting. You know that. I've been told, Pete replied. They stood in silence. The anger mostly spent, replaced by mutual understanding, or at least mutual exhaustion. The security guard shifted, unsure if intervention was still needed. The producer glanced at Jimmy, then back at Pete, waiting for someone to act. Finally, Jimmy spoke. You need to leave. Not because I'm kicking you out, but because we both need this to end. Pete nodded. Yeah, okay. He started toward the exit, the security guard trailing respectfully at the edge of the stage. He paused, turning back one last time. Jimmy, he called. Jimmy looked up. For what it's worth, I don't think you're a bad guy. I just think we're all trapped in a system that doesn't let us be real. Jimmy didn't respond immediately. Processing. Finally, he said, maybe you're right, but I still have a show to finish. Pete nodded. Good luck with that. And then he walked off, the security guard behind him, leaving Jimmy standing alone. The audience didn't know whether to applaud or stay silent, so they did a little of both. A scattered, hesitant clapping that faded quickly. Jimmy turned to the cameras, his face a mixture of emotions nobody had ever seen from him on air. Well, he said, voice tight. That happened. He walked back to his desk, sat heavily, staring at his cards without really seeing them. We're going to take a break, he told the camera. And when we come back, I honestly don't know what we're doing. The producer called cut, and Jimmy slumped further in his chair. The weight of everything settling in, the audience sat stunned, processing what they had just witnessed. This wasn't a planned bit. It wasn't a publicity stunt. This was a raw confrontation about entertainment, authenticity, and the masks we all wear. Whether the footage would Aurora get buried, nobody knew, but everyone in that studio that night knew they had witnessed something unprecedented. So, what do you think really happened between Pete and Jimmy? Was it a breakdown, a breakthrough, or something else entirely? Comment below and let us know. Do late-night shows need to be more real? Is escapism what makes them valuable?